We're good to go? Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming and participating. This is the third session in a series called Can Water for Food Help Peaceful Outcomes? This session is basically going to happen in two parts. We'll have three speakers share experiences working in this space of food and water security in pursuit of peaceful outcomes. And then we'll move to a session that's a panel facilitated by Richard Callback and the speakers and other people invited to share their responses and ideas around the theme. As I said, this is it's a three sessions, and session one started on Sunday, and we heard from a number of experts who are giving us the context in which we're living, and you all know, and why you're here at the conference and why you're here at the session, that we're facing a lot of challenges in the pursuit of food and water security, and a tremendous amount of violence, war, conflict, tensions that really become obstacles to human well-being, integrated human development, what we're looking for, and preservation, conservation of our natural resources. So what we understand is the need for intentional, deliberate efforts for peaceful outcomes in the work we do. It doesn't come naturally, automatically, from working in the space of food and water security. So we need to be intentional about this effort, and that's what the series of sessions have been. So session one was about the context to where we are, looking at there's more than 50 violent conflicts happening in the world. We have some of the highest rates of migration in history happening at this time. The special concerns of people so poor that they can't migrate and they're forced to stay in these places. We talked about the importance of empowering women, empowering youth to be leaders in leading this work going forward. And yesterday was session two, where we looked at tools and approaches that can enable this work. A really interesting set of tools and approaches that are kind of maybe don't automatically come to mind. We looked at the role of research as helping prioritize strategic investments that will lead to these peaceful outcomes. And we're looking at peace, we're talking about equity, we're looking at social development, inclusion, participatory governance. We were looking at the effort of the global dialogue on water tenure for food security, how to empower communities to be real stewards of their water resources for food production, and the challenges and the opportunities to be able to do that through the global dialogue. We also looked at a set of tools promoted by the World Bank Group and International Finance Corporation, environmental and social standards performance, which becomes sort of a filter for what types of investments will be made in the area of food and water security to make sure that those projects are set up to deliver on what we're looking for in terms of human development, peaceful outcomes, and environmental sustainability. So now we're in session three, and in this session we're going to be hearing from real-world circumstances and projects that sharing evidence, success, and also the challenges of trying to do this work on the ground, speaking with people who work in very challenging environments and hearing from the wisdom from their own experience. So I will introduce our first speaker who's online, Marcos San Juan. Marcos is a program manager for the a integrated water and land management program in the eastern part of El Salvador, which has faced very high levels of violence and out-migration. And he's been leading this type of work in Central America for nearly 20 years. Go ahead, Marcos.
Hello, good afternoon. Buenos días para mí. It's quite early in the morning here in El Salvador, but there's nothing that we can do with a good coffee from this mountain. Please, I'm going to show you with the screen. I don't know if the presentation is there. Yeah, it's there. So next slide, please. So let me present you this mountain. This is Cacahuatiki Mountain in the eastern part of El Salvador. And this mountain, it's not only beautiful, but it's also very important in terms of water supply. Next, please. There's more than 160,000 people that relies on the water from this mountain. And unfortunately, there's a degradation process due to bad agriculture practices in the mountain. So CRS and different entities, our partners, we had the objective to tackle both challenges. So to contribute to water and food security by restoring water resources and strengthening local governance. Next, please. We did it through 3 strategies. The first one is to promote regenerative agriculture practices in water research areas. So in this way, farmers improve the yields and are more resilient to climate impacts. And the same practices also increase rainwater infiltration, which improve quality and quantity of water available downstream. Next. The second strategy is focused on the water operators, on the community and municipal water operators, because the aim is that they are the main stakeholders, the main actor to promote these restoration processes. And the third strategy is to create networking and to improve local governance. Next, please. So through these interventions that it has lasted 10 years, and not with an unique and only project, it's a sum of different projects. So which are the results? We are very happy to see through a survey to 1,000 residents, we are very happy to see that the population recognizes the importance of protecting the research area and that they understand the concept. And this is something that it didn't happen 10 years ago. So it's for us, it's a quite important issue. Next, please. But also that even the people that has not been trained recognize this importance of protecting the water resources, the source water sources, and also that it's important to do it improving and changing the kind of agriculture, because you know that in the conservation and protection field, it is more focused on reforestation, on land works, but not so much on agriculture. And we have seen that the people recognizes it. Please, next. So there's no time to talk about all the impacts. There are several. I mean, farmers have improved the yields. Many water systems also improve the water supply. But something that for us is very important is the governance focus. We could say that, for instance, 4 networks have been created. There's one, for instance, let me just explain the story. One, it's developing protection activities every year in the last 8 years. So it's quite a success. Next. But and however, we also have several frustrating experiences. After lots of efforts and work, some initiatives do not happen as we wish, as it was the promising issue. Why? Because there's a lack of leadership and a lack of social cohesion. Next. Facing this constraint, we start implementing a social cohesion and peace building approach since 2022. And it was focused to partner organizations, staff, and mainly to local leaders. Next. The results, although it's a short period of practice, of experience, are so good. We are realizing how the platforms, the organizations are improving their performance just because these trainings and how to support leadership. Next. And as a final remark, or just some lessons learned, some reflections. We find that it's so important to build an ecosystem of relationships and collaborations. And you know, governance, it's a living process. It's organic. It's not linear. In some occasions, it's successful. Other ones, it's so weak. And that's why it's so important to build leadership. Our experience is that we were focused in building organizations and networking, but not leadership and not social cohesion. And this is so important. And if you want to build leadership, personal leadership is so key, is a cornerstone to also do it from tackling with the inner peace. Inner peace is necessary for fostering collective peace. To end, it's just to remark that back to the source is a necessary approach. Back to the source, the term, it means that we need to protect our water sources, and by doing this, we can also improve agriculture and food. And we need to reconnect with oneself as a basis for connecting with others. That's all with the time we have. Thank you.
Excellent, Marcos. I've been working with Marcos for about 15 years. I'm Paul Hicks, and I work with Catholic Relief Services, also based in El Salvador. And I love it that Marcos is having the opportunity to share this work. He walks the talk. He's been doing this for nearly 20 years in El Salvador. So he's a practitioner on the ground, and at the same time, he's working on his graduate degree, his dissertation, exactly on these themes, and knows firsthand how challenging it is, and how kind of the tools and approaches can only take you so far. But it really is about building those relationships and being able to kind of weather the ups and downs and the challenges that are there. It's taken me some time and catching up to the sort of the organizers and the thinkers behind these 3 sessions, and seeing the flow and the logic of how this was organized. And so kind of seeing how this 3rd session fits into the previous 2 sessions. And part of that is like building this community of practice of people researchers, people on the ground, development workers, finance institutions, all recognizing the importance of this. And so it's just been a great experience to be thinking through these sessions and hearing different ideas and the collaborations. And so that's a bit of an intro to Nicole Lefort. She's the Associate Director for Sustainable Agriculture at the Water Management Institute at the University of Nebraska Doherty Water for Food Global Institute. That's a big title. Yeah. So a real innovator leading the innovation lab in agriculture and mechanized agriculture. Welcome.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, I wasn't watching where I was going. The previous presentation was such a nice intro into what I'm going to talk about, because when we talk about peace and conflict in today's world, we tend to think about it in the big conflicts that are occurring, the big wars where we define them by thousands of people who have died, or the large conflicts that are cross-border. But actually, there's a lot of conflict that occurs within the household and occurs between households. So what I'm going to talk about has more to do with the experiences of water insecurity, food insecurity, and conflict at those scales. So it's a nice entry point into what I want to talk about. I want to actually start by saying that USAID supported the research that I'm going to present. It's very rare in research to get 10 years to actually follow a topic and do the kind of depth of research that enables you to develop this rich of evidence. So I want to thank USAID for that. The research was actually conducted by IFPRI, the International Food Policy Research Institute, under the Innovation Lab for Small-Scale Irrigation. So I was the director of the Innovation Lab, but IFPRI was the implementer of the research, and I'm going to present evidence. And the research was conducted between 2013 and 2023 in different phases. Next slide. So there's a lot of assumptions about irrigation and food security, particularly big irrigation schemes and increasing yields, which really revolves around increasing calories. And there's also been assumptions that the link between irrigation and nutrition is really about farmers consuming their own produce. So this research initiative and this project really wanted to challenge those assumptions and dig a little bit deeper into what are the actual pathways between small-scale irrigation and different types of nutrition outcomes. I'm not going to read what's on the slides, but these are the different pathways that IFPRI conceptualized at the beginning and the outset of this research is what is the link in terms of agricultural production? So that could be, what are you producing and consuming yourself? An increase in household income, which means you increase income through irrigation, but then you purchase food. Looking at water supply and wash pathways to improve nutrition, and then looking at women's empowerment and the roles of irrigation and women and nutritional outcomes. So this really provided a framework for the field research that was done. Next slide. We worked in Ethiopia, Ghana, Tanzania, and later added Mali. These were survey-based studies. Claudia Ringler is here from IFPRI. She could tell you the exact number of surveys that were done, but it was in the thousands across the countries. And what we did was we compared irrigating and non-irrigating households to look at particularly dietary diversity. Dietary diversity is often an indicator of nutrition, but it's also a step towards improved nutrition. So the focus was really comparing irrigating and non-irrigating households and looking at what dietary diversity was like within the household, but also for women in that household and for children in the household. And then looking at what pathways were what were the strongest in particular countries or particular subregions and districts in terms of these changes in dietary diversity. So a couple of snapshots here. This was several years of research, so there's a number of papers out on this, and I'll just give you a couple of indications of the different countries. In Ethiopia, it was found that yes, small-scale irrigating households did have improved household dietary diversity, but it was prominently the income pathway. Irrigators sold what they produced and then purchased more foods. So that may be animal sourced food, animal source foods, and it can be also vegetables and fruits. In Ghana, the primary, a more dominant pathway compared to Ethiopia was self-production. So looking at where were people sourcing their food from. So in Ghana and Mali, we found households did produce more dietary diversity in their irrigated sites, but they also consumed more of that. So yes, there was some purchase of foods, but we saw the production pathway a little bit stronger. And I think it's also important to note that in most of these cases, we also saw an increase in purchased sugar and honey. So yes, dietary diversity increased, but there's also a little bit of a cautionary tale of saying when that income increases and people are buying from the market, they may be buying more sugar and sweetened foods as well. So these different pathways, whether that's a production pathway or whether it's an income pathway, are very influenced by local conditions. So it could be production diversity, agroecological conditions, diet preferences, as we see diets changing with urbanization, and also different types of irrigation technologies. So there was a number of factors that led to these different pathways. Next slide. So for me, this was one of the most important outcomes that we found was the impact of irrigation, or being a child in an irrigating household, and how that improved child nutrition. We found that in irrigating households compared to non-irrigating, the weight for height Z-scores of children under 5, and this is Ethiopia here, improved. And, in reducing wasting and improving child nutrition is incredibly important to reduce longer-term stunting and the effects of stunting on development. In Tanzania, this is a really important thing as well, was that not only did the height for weight scores improve, but it also improved during drought. So what we found was that the irrigating households were able to stabilize production and stabilize income through drought periods. So that indicates that household dietary diversity was more stable, child nutrition was more stable, and women's dietary diversity was more stable during drought periods. So it's a clear mechanism for resilience. The other thing that we looked at also through quite extensive qualitative research over those years was understanding the opportunities for women in terms of water for agriculture. The evidence wasn't necessarily as direct and clear for the links between women's empowerment, irrigation, women's empowerment, and nutritional outcomes, but we definitely found there were direct and indirect effects of irrigation for women's empowerment and for household outcomes. And this is really important as we see increased migration and as we see the roles of women in agricultural change. So really thinking about women's role in agriculture and whether or not irrigation investments are targeting women's empowerment for those outcomes, and whether those irrigation investments are nutritionally sensitive. So that was another key thing. We did not find as strong of a link with the WASH, irrigation and WASH to nutrition. Next slide. I'm not going to go over this except to say that this research actually did have influence in terms of future programs through a guideline that was co-developed with World Bank around nutritional sensitive irrigation investments. So never say that research doesn't make a difference. Yep. So, I mean, just these are the two summary points, is that irrigating households, so irrigation interventions, do impact dietary diversity within the households, improves the outcomes for women and children, and there are potential benefits for women in terms of empowerment and income as well, if there are very specific measures and approaches that are taken to design any type of investment for those nutritional outcomes and for more gender-sensitive outcomes. So that's the main points that I wanted to cover. And again, thanking IFPRI for the work that they did and USAID for being willing to support a longer research program. So thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. And amazingly, speakers right on time. And so we will have a time for a couple of questions after our next speaker, the third speaker. I just kind of understanding the context in which so many development workers and so many researchers and donors and others are working in, and the idea that conflict isn't something that's out there that might happen. It's the conflict, tension, is the whole milieu in which we're existing. I was just met Moshfegh, who's from Afghanistan, from a city of Herat. I lived and worked in Herat from 2004 to 2008, a beautiful city surrounded by real productive agricultural lands, and who benefited from 20 years of serious investments into agricultural development, markets, kind of holistic, everything you can think of. And then with the collapse of the democratic government and the Taliban taking control again, all of that gets kind of set back for however many decades we don't know. But recognizing that there has to be some intentionality and strategic investments in ensuring that we're setting up the effective governance systems to ensure that we do have the peaceful processes that will enable real development to occur. So with that context, I want to introduce Sarah Heyman, who's the WASH advisor for the Swedish Red Cross. As you know, the Red Cross has a reputation of working in some of the hardest, most difficult places in the world, where we're looking at either natural disasters or human-related disasters or war and effects. And so she will be sharing some of the work of trying to set up food and water security solutions in a very challenging environment.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope my slides will appear shortly. Oh, yes, okay. Yes, so I am presenting today on behalf of several colleagues, including from Sudanese Red Crescent, Sarah Al-Bakrawi, who is online. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the Red Cross Red Crescent is the largest global humanitarian organization in the world. We work through a federation structure, so the International Federation of the Red Cross Red Crescent is a coordinating body, and then there are what's called national societies present in most of the countries around the world. And there are over 12,000 staff and 14 million volunteers involved in what's called the Red Cross Red Crescent movements. This movement operates with a unique mandate that's protected under the Geneva Conventions. This is specifically to help people who are affected by war and conflict, whereas the movement also works with people affected by natural disasters and climate change as well. We see the International Committee of the Red Cross as particularly active in cases of war and conflict. And the Red Cross movement is guided by the 7 core or fundamental principles, which are listed here, which we don't have time to go through, but there is many discussions to be had about working or attempting to work with these principles. So today I will be presenting a case study of working with water security and food security in Sudan, where Swedish Red Cross has been partnering with Sudanese Red Crescent for over 25 years, and in different sectors, including emergency response and disaster risk reduction. And this case study is specifically on a disaster risk reduction project working on reservoir or Hefir rehabilitation. And the goal of the project was to contribute to strengthening the capacity of people in this local community, which was established as a high-risk and vulnerable community in Sudan, and to work through implementing activities that would reduce disaster risks and support adaptation to climate change. So this project was funded by, I'll just go back really quick to say, the project was funded by the Swedish Embassy, and the timeline was in 2002 was the conception or initiation, and it's ending, the reporting period is currently happening right now in 2024. The assessments for the project were conducted in January 2023. And several months later, in April 2023, a war erupted in Sudan. And as Nicole, you mentioned, like, this is one of those global, like, huge catastrophes that's currently still ongoing. It's the largest population displacement in the world, with over 25 million people needing humanitarian assistance and nearly 18 million people affected by acute hunger. So critical infrastructure, of course, has been severely compromised, and within this context, the Sudanese Red Crescent has been implementing this project. At community level, the goal was established to work on rehabilitating this reservoir because the community identified that they were highly threatened by water scarcity as well as droughts, and water was important to their food security, livelihoods, and public health. They identified specific issues related to that could be resolved through rehabilitating the reservoir, including contamination from animals because livestock are accessing the reservoir, public safety issues, and affordability issues connected to the maintenance or use of the reservoir. So the activities that Sudanese Red Crescent implemented in collaboration with the local community included fencing the reservoir, creating a separate basin for animals to access versus where humans would access, and reinforcing a management scheme where there was a committee established to basically govern between different stakeholders who could, under what circumstances and what payment mechanisms, utilize the water from the reservoir. So this project involved numerous stakeholders, as I mentioned, in the community who were all sharing access to the reservoir, including farmers, pastoralists, villagers, and IDPs. There were follow-up actions taken by the community as well, which show their continued ownership of the project. They initiated actions on their own and followed up with other organizations taking the work forward on activities identified that the Sudanese Red Crescent weren't able to complete within that time frame. There were numerous challenges working in the context which I described. The Sudanese Red Crescent was heavily affected in terms of their capacity to communicate, their transportation modalities, The project was on hold for months, and there were several barriers to getting money into the country, including financial transfers from Sweden. But there were a few things I can highlight related to the success of the project, and this was utilizing tools which enabled volunteers to work in a participatory and consultative process with the community, which one of these tools is called the Enhanced Vulnerability Capacity Assessment, and more information about this is on the International Federation of the Red Cross website. This is conducted with focus group discussions. It's conducted with all the different stakeholders described, and allows the community to identify locally appropriate solutions to the risks that they prioritize. Another enabler or success was using this community engagement and accountability approach. This incorporates the inclusion of different perspectives and feedback mechanisms. And finally, using a local actor such as Sudanese Red Crescent, who has been since 1965 active in Sudan, and who knows, the volunteers know very well the community and the social cultural dynamics. This is invaluable to having a successful implementation in such a fragile context. And finally, the role of the donors' flexibility to change timelines and change activity plans, and in this type of context is also critical. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So as I mentioned, we have a few minutes for questions. I have a couple of questions to address kind of to the entire group, but if there are any questions from the audience, welcome to raise them. A question directed for Nicole in particular is the. We have some audience questions. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. Oh, go ahead.
I think I just had a quick question for you, Nicole. So the research that you did, when you were talking about irrigation, was it like rain-fed agriculture, or like groundwater, or canal?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we actually looked across a number of technologies. So our focus was on smallholder irrigators. So most of them are doing rain-fed agriculture as well, but they're also doing supplemental and dry season irrigation. So that was comparing the non-irrigating rain-fed household only versus the irrigating households. And in terms of the irrigating households, they would have been using different technologies, different methods, different water sources. So in that regard, we didn't necessarily, you couldn't set this up as an experiment where we could have very consistent, like everyone's using groundwater or everyone's using surface water, but we separated by rain-fed only, and then rain-fed plus supplemental and dry season irrigation across technologies and types of water sources.
No, just to add, because I was in India at the International Ag Econ Conference, there was a PhD student from Gießen who compared small-scale irrigation, individual irrigation with public irrigation systems. He also did the nutrition assessment. I'll put you in touch. The papers are not yet published, so he presented preliminary results, if you're interested in that difference. So because I'm interested in looking at groundwater.
Yes.
I am generally interested in looking at groundwater and its use in agriculture, and I was like especially curious to know because a lot of areas where you face groundwater decline is usually because of agriculture. So I was wondering if that decline would have an impact on nutritional levels. So I just wanted to see if there was any sort of analysis within the population who were the irrigated households in the study. So based on like what irrigation system they're using, if there was like any analysis in terms of nutritional outcomes.
On the link between nutrition, gender, and irrigation, just to get very, very specific, one takeaway action that you would recommend that you've seen so effective that you'd like to recommend it be considered for scale up, both for nutrition and for gender engagement. Can you give us one takeaway on each of those?
Don't give women pumps for free and expect it to make a difference, I think was one very clear. It's more what not to do, but I think, there's a lot of issues around women and technology, and we did quite an in-depth qualitative study looking at what happens when a pump gets into a household. And there were donors and continue to be donors who give away pumps to women, assuming that that's going to help. But oftentimes those pumps end up in someone else's hands in the family or in the broader family. And so we're now looking at alternatives to pump ownership, such as irrigation service provision or finding other roles for women. So it's not necessarily what to do, but it's something that you probably don't want to do.
I'm going to stick with you. The connection between household nutrition and peace outcomes.
Yeah. So, as starting out by following up on Marcos is this idea of, individual and household peace, right? So understanding that water insecurity affects peace at different scales. And when you are stabilizing income and stabilizing nutrition, it actually does contribute to household well-being and reduction of conflict within the household, and sometimes not always within the community. But then also there are links in the other direction of when you have conflict, getting food in from external areas, getting inputs for agriculture often becomes strained. So you lose input supply chains. And so the ability of households to irrigate and to have these kind of localized production systems to stabilize access to food is actually really important during conflict times, perhaps reducing migration outwards because of lack of food, but also ensuring a certain stability in income and food consumption during conflict times.
Claudia? Yeah.
Thanks. I have a question to Marcos. So he has this watershed approach, and I think you mentioned there's a lot of land conflict. And so to what extent can these watershed interventions improve collective action? We also know it's a fragmented situation, and address land conflicts, or what else is needed? To what extent can these kind of landscape type approaches make a difference in terms of land conflicts? That would be interesting to hear. Anyone else? To Marcos?
Yes. Marcos, did you catch that?
Yeah, I think so. Well, in the case of Cacahuatique, it's not a matter of land conflict. It's more about lack of leadership. So that we try to promote some governance processes, and some failed due to this lack of leadership, lack of social cohesion. There was a platform of community water systems, more than 20 water community systems, that they had agreed to invest in source water protection, but it never happened because the leaders, the board of the platform didn't really implement the actions because the conflicts among them. And this is just an example, but the message is that we don't need a big conflict, a war, or even a conflict in terms of land management even, but the issue of just relationships and the lack of leadership might make a big difference. I don't know if I answered the question, but otherwise, just let me know.
Great, thank you. One last question?
So thank you very much. I would also partly like to ask this to Marcos, but maybe also to Sarah and Julia. So building this social cohesion in a crisis context, how do you motivate somebody to invest in those kind of processes? Because it takes people's time and effort, and it's not like you can measure, oh, we got 2 more kilos of this or 3 liters less of that. And it's not more pumps or more areas or something really measurable and tangible. So how do you motivate people to support and invest in such social cohesion building, leadership building processes, and especially both in conflict and maybe a slightly less conflicted area? So it's to both the speakers, please.
Can you take that one, Sarah?
Yes, I think I was just thinking of the context of this case in Sudan and this project. The actors were motivated because they identified they jointly identified the risk of the risks and how it affected them, each perhaps coming from a different perspective, whether they were nomads or whether they were residents in the village or whether they had livestock. And so in a sense, it wasn't a task to kind of encourage their participation, but it was their self-motivation through seeing how the issues affected their daily lives and what they stood to gain from participating in the project. Someone else have something to add?
We are going to, Angel, our young moderator there, is pushing us forward. So we're going to transition into the next half of this session, which will be facilitated by Richard Callback.
Thanks. And for this next session, there's going to be a little bit of juggling because we have some online and some people in the room. I'm going to give you kind of the run of play, and then we're going to jump straight into it. So I'm going to just say a couple of words about the session at the beginning, which is really bringing out the private sector, the public sector, and the civil society sector interaction. How do they come together? And we're going to really try to focus as much as we can on tangible examples, case studies, experiences that maybe we haven't covered in the first part of the conversation. So I'm going to allow each of the people who are involved to introduce themselves, because I don't think I'm the best person to introduce them. And then we're going to have a couple of questions from myself, a couple of questions from the floor, a little bit of a wrap-up, and then each of the people who is speaking is going to have a chance to give their takeaway, their one-moment speech. So without more ado, I'd like to invite the 2 speakers who are in the room to come up, 2 panelists who are in the room to come up. I'll start with them, allowing them to introduce themselves. Sarah, you've already had a chance to introduce yourself, so I'm going to allow you just to take a seat. And we know who you are, so thank you for that earlier session. Then we're going to have Batanai, who's going to introduce herself briefly for a moment. I have Elad Levi on the line, should be on the screen in a minute, from NetFM, Luba Shara from IFC, who will talk to us a little bit about what she's done in Kakuma in northern Kenya. We're going to also have Marian Kamani, who's going to be talking a little bit about a project she has in Ethiopia and how she's engaging with host communities there. And Batanai, who we haven't heard from before, has done some work with SADC community on groundwater management and on gender. So we're going to have some very, very different perspectives. So can I start with you, maybe just a moment of introduction. Do we have a microphone for the people on the stage so we can hear them? Otherwise, I'm sure they're happy to shout, but it's a slightly longer session. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. So my name is Batanai Gwangwawa, and I work with the SADC Groundwater Management Institute, and I work there as an environment and social management specialist, but I also specialize in gender. We work with local communities as well as government departments of water in the 16 SADC economic zones countries. Thank you.
Thanks. And then if we have you connected, Elad, can I go to you just for a very brief introduction of who you are and how you've experienced this interaction, this interchange, interlinkage between water, food, and human security, some of the more complex markets you've worked in. Over to you, Elad, for a moment's introduction. If anyone's struggling, I'm going to go straight to the next, and I'll give you a chance to reconnect. Do we have Elad with us? Okay, maybe I can go to Luba. Do we have Luba on the line?
Yes, they're all online.
They're all online. Okay, so are we going to connect Elad first and give him a moment? This is what I said when I said juggling before. With this room filled with thousands of people, we can afford slight breaks, but not much. Elad, excellent. So we have three people online. Elad's having some difficulties with the sound. You're muted at the moment, Elad. Maybe we can unmute Elad so he can speak. It is challenging at times.
All right, can you hear me, guys?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right. Sorry. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Everyone from Shanghai, China. I'm Elad Levy, currently the Senior Vice President for the Europe, Middle East, and Africa region at Netafim. Over the years, I've had the privilege of working on several projects where water, food security, and community development intersect, particularly in regions like Sub-Saharan Africa. One of the most impactful experiences was leading a solar-powered drip irrigation project for a smallholder farmers in Niger, in collaboration with the IFC. This project is part of our broader effort to optimize precision irrigation across Africa, aiming to address food security challenges by improving water use efficiency. And today I would be happy to share with you some insights from that project and others, and to discuss how targeted investments in water management can drive peace and stability across various levels, from households to national policies. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Elad. Can I go over to Luba now? A brief introduction of you and the work that you've been doing successfully in northern Kenya.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Hi, Richard, colleagues. My name is Luba Shara. I'm the project manager of Kakuma Tobay Challenge Fund. It's the IFC project we do implement in Kakuma refugee area of northern Kenya. It was important to understand that refugee camps are not organic settlements. So people usually settle on the banks of rivers with access to water. In case of refugee camps, we do have more than 100 of them, Eastern and Horn of Africa. Those settlements were settled because either the communities or the governments allowed the different agencies, UNHCR, to temporarily allocate people there. And that temporary now lasts for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And that creates a huge challenge, not only with water, first of all, because people should consume water, but also use water for production use. So my participation today is about sharing my experience as a project manager and the team's experience about what we're doing in Kakuma, what challenges we have, and generally how we cooperate with other agencies and partners in accessing water for host communities and refugees. Thank you.
Thank you, Luba. Over to you, Mariam.
Thank you, Richard, and good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Mariam Kimani. I'm also with the IFC based in Nairobi. I lead a project that we call the Climate Smart Share Farming Project in Ethiopia, in the Somali region, one of the fragile regions in Ethiopia. And this 1,000 hectares of land is operated by cooperatives that have memberships of both refugees and host communities. So we are looking at issues of social cohesion, But the region is also has a river that's called Genale River. And so part of the conversation that we'll have today is about how do we engage with the host community as private sector and looking at the resources that are currently in such a fragile and remote region such as the Somali one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just to lay the ground again for you so that you have a chance to think about your questions, we have here private sector who are manufacturing equipment and selling it. We have here two examples of investment in the private sector and that interaction between host communities, refugee communities and the private sector, and where we as an organization IFC Invest, we have an example of dealing with extreme conflict and being right in the middle of the action from Red Cross, Red Crescent, and we have an example of this kind of governmental, intergovernmental gender and water resource piece. So we've got very, very different perspectives, and I'd like to kind of ask a couple of questions that may be a little bit more probing around what that kind of interaction looks like and the complexity of it. So the first question I had, and I'll kind of open it, if you just want to raise your hand, we'll come to you, because some of these questions are going to be more private, some of them are going to be more public sector, so some people may feel more comfortable with the others. When we look at this interaction, this interspace between these different areas, they're quite high stakes. We've heard examples of Sudan, we've heard examples of Ethiopia, we've heard examples of Niger. How do you balance the fact that you're an external party? Often when you're coming in to these, you're not part of the community. Most times you're not. In fact, almost the majority of cases that we hear from, you're not part of that community, you're an external party, and you need to meet your own objectives. You're there for a reason. You're there to do something, to write a report, to sell equipment, to make an investment. How do you balance that with the needs of the local community who are relying on water, in this case, for their very survival? So that balance, that interaction, that tension, that complexity, how do you balance that out? So if you want to think about it, great. If you want to raise your hand, I'll come straight to you. Okay, so let's start here in the room, and then I'll go on screen, and then I'll come back to the room if we want to.
Thank you for that. So I'll give an example from the work that we do at the Groundwater Management Institute. So our objective is for sustainable management of groundwater resources. And how we do this is we develop monitoring networks in the region. And these monitoring networks essentially are boreholes, but are not for productive use for the community. And that alone is a point of departure already for the communities, because when a community sees us drill a borehole, they immediately think, now this is a source of water for us. And for those communities, water is about survival. It's not about project timelines that I have or the data that I want from that borehole, the monitoring borehole that I've put in. And so what I've experienced is that if I don't engage the community from the word go on the need for a monitoring network, in the end, it actually supports what they want to do with the water as a resource. But if they don't understand the objective from where I stand, then we are going to have problems. So we are in phase 2 of this project. The first phase was successful, but had challenges because we did not balance those objectives, our objectives and the objectives of the community. Our objectives were to just drill the bores, get the data, analyze it, and then give out the information out there. And so the problems that we then encountered there was vandalism of our infrastructure, because they still wanted to access the water from those bores. So in the phase 2, we've actually done the design to include the community from the initial and say, what do you want from this groundwater resource? This is what they want, and they tell us, and then we say, this is what we want. So now we're working together with the community. It's an ongoing process, and I think that once we manage the interests that are conflicting in this case, then we are able to work together. At least the community will know that this monitoring board is actually in this place because it wants to help us to have better information about what resource is there and how we can use it for many, many years, instead of exploiting it and then we wake up tomorrow without that water. I think for now, I'll end there.
Thank you. Can I go maybe online? If you just want to raise your hand, so I know that you're a speaker. Okay, so Elad, can I come to you for a minute? Your perspective. You're coming in from the outside. You're a commercial organisation. The only way you can survive as an organisation is to be profitable. It doesn't make sense to go out in the market and lose money day after day. So how do you balance that with the needs of the community that you're coming into, who may be competing for water?
I think balancing our corporate objectives with the needs of local communities requires a nuanced approach, particularly in regions where water is as much as a cultural resource as it is a survival tool. In our Niger project, for example, our goal was to implement solar-powered drip irrigation systems to enhance agricultural productivity, a critical need in an area where traditional rain-fed agriculture was proving increasingly unreliable due to climate change. However, we knew that simply installing these systems wasn't enough. The success of our project depended on deep community engagement. And we started by holding extensive consultation with local farmers and community leaders to understand their water-related challenges and cultural practices and perspectives. This dialogue revealed that while there was initial skepticism about the new technology, there was also a strong desire for solutions that could provide reliable access to water. We then tailored our approach to ensure that the irrigation systems were not just technically effective, but also culturally appropriate and easy to use. For instance, we provided hands-on training that demonstrated how systems could be seamlessly integrated into their existing farming practices. And this approach helped us build trust and ensure that the community saw the benefits of the technology, leading to a widespread adoption, while not compromising on our commercial benefits. By aligning our objectives with the community needs, we not only met our goals, but also contributed to the long-term sustainability and stability of the area we have engaged in.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to take one more online, and then I'm going to come maybe to Sarah if you want to comment on this, and then one more quick round of questions, and then I'm going to open up to the floor because we do have a limited amount of time. So, Marion or Luba, do you want to answer that question, that first one about the complexity? Please go ahead, Luba.
Yes, thanks a lot, Richard. So for us, there are a couple of rules. And the first rule that organizations, private or public, who implement projects in highly fragile areas should really adopt the rule of do no harm. And we do talk about that as a development community, but I really mean it. So it should be discussed how the project actually incorporate the do no harm principles in its work. And to start with, we typically conduct the fragility studies where we understand what are the existing conflicts, specifically around water, who are the main players, who is the community, because community is not one person or a group of people. There might be multiple layers of community. There might be traditional authorities, there might be politicians, there might be government people, representatives of the national government. So all of that should be learned and taken into consideration. Please do not come to fragile or marginalized communities thinking that you know everything or this is my project and I will implement that without actually learning about the local ways of dealing with water or other conflicts. Also very important is what previous speaker said, that it's important to share the water. So whatever production volumes you have in mind, it's important to share the water because that's your mandate to operate. You cannot just use the water from local community for your production purposes and not share with, let's say, women in the nearest village. I would also say that it's important not to make empty promises like we will build this and do this and we will dig the borehole, because quite often the water supply might be limited or the water might be saline, but people typically do not understand the technicalities, and when you promised and didn't deliver, it might really, really harm your projects. And overall, I think much more needs to be done beyond if the corporate or corporation is coming to a marginalized community beyond very typical CSR, just to learn about the community and do what the community needs. And that's my connection to the first point about the fragility assessment. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to actually switch now to the second question, and I'm going to give Marion a chance and Sarah a chance to respond to this one. And then if time allows, I'll just do a quick time check after that. I'll maybe allow the others to come to it. The second question I had was what were or what are the most difficult and unsolved challenges in managing water in the projects in which you've worked, in the examples you've given us? So Marion, I'll come to you in a minute if you want to, or Sarah, I can come to you first. What is the biggest challenge that remained unresolved or you face today and that you really want to work out? Marion, I know that you've done a lot of upfront work already and it's taken some time to launch the project, but you faced an enormous number of challenges, whether it be floods, whether it be droughts, whether it be availability of water. Can you illustrate for us a little bit of that? What currently keeps you up at night around water in this context?
Thank you, Richard. I think you've actually touched on two things. So, in the region where we're operating, we had a historic drought for almost 3 years. And then recently, for the past year, we've had flooding situations now, that excess floods. And so that has been a big challenge. And I think one of the main things is that we've been looking at flood irrigation of the operations that have currently been going on in the region. We've been dealing with flood irrigation all this time. So trying to do the switch now that we've been looking at moving towards sprinkler or drip irrigation has been a challenge in terms of, first of all, sensitizing the community of how that was going to work, telling the farmers and informing them how this is going to work. I think that has been a big thing. But also, I think one of the things that we've seen is also the water where we are contains a lot of silt, and that can block irrigation systems. And that, of course, then determines what mode of irrigation then that you would go for. And so that's one thing that we are thinking about. Historically, we've been using, or previously the farmers have been using, pumps to pump the water to the farms. And with the floods, actually, a lot of those pumps were actually submerged. And so that is one big challenge now that we are dealing with repairing these pumps, which is a big cost and that we're really thinking hard about. But also looking at historically that we've been using diesel to power a lot of these pumps and other farm equipment. And now the question arises around climate change and the impact on the climate of using continued use of diesel. And so the question is, how can we switch these use of diesel to solar when it comes to the solar irrigation systems, and of course the cost that is associated with that. So it's a lot of complexity around the irrigation systems, but also in terms of communicating this very efficiently with.
Excellent, thank you. Sarah, maybe coming to you and bring you back on, and thanks for joining us back.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes. Marion already mentioned the challenges around climate change, which we definitely see as well. I would say that another challenge we face is connected to ongoing uncertainty around in fragile contexts, and which was connected to the point earlier on the necessity to adapt, to continue to be able to adapt our program activities to meet the changing priorities of local communities, where climate change intersects with conflicts. The month to month, the priorities could be different, and I think that this is a major challenge. Also, continuing to work in a principle-based way for our organization, and explaining those principles to all parties involved, including political or government representatives and respecting the access to communities in fragile contexts as well continues to be a challenge.
Excellent, thank you. Can I just do a quick time check, Angel? How much longer have we got in this piece?
Technically, we are over, but I've been monitoring if there are any online questions. So unless there's audio questions that are pressing, continue with the panel until questions arise or cut in.
Great. So maybe I should throw it open to the floor so that you have a chance to speak. You all given us your time to come and listen to us today. Do we have any questions from the floor? Because I have a series of questions I'd love to ask, but I want to open it to you. Please.
Hello. Hello, everybody. I'm Jean-Philippe from Catholic Relief Services. I think my question, it can be for several of the presenters, but maybe more for Ed. I'm not sure I got your name right, sorry. Is it Ed?
Elad.
Elad, sorry, I don't have good eyes. So the question is from a business perspective. So you were working in, talking about Niger, providing a solution for solar pumped irrigation, and the importance to respond to the real needs of the community. So the question is, knowing that people have multiple uses for water and not only irrigation, even if you are able to provide a response, a technical response for irrigation, how would you consider also the other needs so as not to create a sort of inequity in access to water for the multiple water users, is the first thing. And the second thing is also, do you look also at the issue of maybe sustainability of the resource that is used for irrigation? Because you might have a solution on day one with pumping, having water for irrigation, but it might not last forever because of lacking to assess the sustainability of the resource. So the question is dual on considering multiple users and maybe domestic uses, livestock, for example, even if you work on irrigation, and considering the sustainability of the resource. Thank you.
Yeah. First, I think with regards to the first point, with regards to water for irrigation and water for drinking, I don't think that in this specific case, I understand what you mean, but in this specific case, there was no competition because the water that were pumped were in a quality that is suitable for agriculture and for irrigation rather than for drinking. That was a different water source. There was one case that it was that there was some kind of some part of the water could have been used for drinking, but it wasn't used just because of community preferences. So that's for this project. Of course, we can discuss on other projects where we are discussing together with community leaders how we do not create that competition. It is vital to make sure that the community and the community leadership is involved to ensure that such competition is mitigated. With regards to the sustainability, I will say that from a quality perspective of the system, and this is something that is vast across Africa, we should not compromise on quality of the system because we are discussing and we're engaging small farmers. Small farmers are entitled to high quality systems just as large commercial companies. And this is something that we are implementing across many geographies, including in India, Latin America, and of course, Africa. So in terms of quality, we're not compromising. We are providing the systems that are long lasting. But that's only the first stage. The second stage, of course, is the training on the system, making sure that the communities are able to operate the system for the long run. And it's not complicated, but the training requires some, I would say, prudent understanding of both the technology, but also the local culture. So I think that what we did is bridging in between the two. And we are very proud that our systems, few years down the road, are being used in a, I would say, in a very sustainable way. And of course, there is always a place for improvement. So we are learning also from where we see that this situation is not happening, and we're learning from that.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Okay, please go ahead.
I actually had two, but like if there's time for one, I can pick one.
One's good.
Okay, great. I think then I'll ask Marianne, because you mentioned about the project where you were trying to sort of promote drip irrigation and sprinkler irrigation. So like till like last year, I was also working in a similar context in India where farmers were practicing flood irrigation, and I was working on a project where we were trying to provide them incentives to reduce their water usage. So it wasn't directly promoting drip irrigation, but the idea was they'll go towards that. And we saw very little adoption, like almost no adoption, because one, I think it's like if you're doing flood irrigation, drip irrigation or sprinkler irrigation seems infeasible unless you change the crop. So I was just like, if you could describe that project a bit more, what kind of results or like earlier results that you're seeing. And do you think like moving to these kinds of water efficient technologies, will it actually lead to savings? Or it could also be that the farmers might just move to a more water guzzling crop because they have more water to use, or they might increase their farm size to grow more, and it eventually might not lead to savings. I was just like, if you could just describe a little more about that project.
Thank you so much. So maybe just to caveat that the project we are working, so we've been working on the preparatory phases, and some of the work that will be coming up in the next few months will actually be focused on this switch that we are talking about from the flood to drip. So I won't be able to give you the insights from that particularly. But I think one of the things that we've planned to do, as you've mentioned about the crops, is currently there are a lot of crops that the farmers are growing at the moment. More or less, we're looking about 10 to 12, and we're planning to have crop trials for about 17 crops, just to see on the different, because it's 1,000 hectares of land, and each of the cooperatives will have its own portion of land. So we do want to do those crop trials just to see how they grow, the kind of water usage that's required for each of the crops, so that then depending on the water usage and the issues that we find, if we do find issues when we switch to the drip or the sprinkler irrigation, then we can look at which are the crops that can be grown successfully. How do we actually do the crop rotation in a way that then does not harm the environment, but then also takes care of the water. So hopefully we'll be able to share some of those insights once the cropping season starts.
Excellent, thank you. So we got how much longer? A minute or two?
Yeah, for the whole session.
Yep.
13 minutes. Oh, sorry. Well, including the closing.
Yep, okay, excellent. So maybe I could just summarize some of the things that we've heard, and then I'll give it back to the people that we've got on the panel just for a couple of words there. So what we've heard is this real need for consultation up front in these very complex environments. Now that's balanced with the need to make decisions and move fast. So it's quite difficult, that tension between consultation, really understanding the context, and the need to make decisions and move forward in these difficult environments. Also, I've heard from everybody this need for equity in the sharing of the resource. I think we would have appreciated that, but don't raise expectations. I think that's one of the points that we've heard. Set reasonable expectations early on for the community. We've also heard this mention of water quality and quantity can both be challenging. So it's not just a matter of water writ large. It's actually a matter of what water, where, how, when, and is it going to be consistent? Because that shifts things, and we've heard this also. As that shifting context of water occurs, you've got to be agile. You've got to be able to adapt to that. You've either got a flood, you've got a drought, you've got poor quality water that's not suitable for drinking, but you're under pressure and an expectation from the broader community that it will be equitably shared. Climate change. Costs and availability of technology are all aspects that we need another couple of hours to cover. But in the context of climate change, fragility, and conflict, it's highly challenging. So I'd like to thank everybody. I know this has been a really quick session. But I'd like to thank everybody for joining and give you another maybe 20 seconds just to wrap up what you'd like us to take away as a room. One key point that you'd like to make about what you've done and what you'd like us to consider in this context. So maybe starting with you.
Thank you very much. I think one key point that I would want everyone to take home is the occurrence of groundwater already teaches us how we need to, or the approach that we need to manage it. And by that, I mean it's transboundary. It does not respect borders. It just occurs. So what that means is that as different countries, as different local communities, as different states, we cannot have silo approach to the management of water. What we need is to come together and decide on what's best for our resource. So it needs to be transboundary. We need to increase our cooperation. And maybe the last thing is that whilst we are here, the absence of war does not mean there's peace. So even when we don't have active conflict right now about water, I'm telling you, if there's somebody today who does not know where they're going to get their next drop of water tomorrow and what they will drink, then that uncertainty, the insecurity for me is war. Thank you.
Okay.
Wow, so she touched on so much. I would agree with. I think one takeaway also would be around local solutions. I think using local actors' knowledge, especially those who are there long-term, is invaluable. No solutions can be kind of copy-pasted. It's important to listen to local communities and for them to participate in designing solutions to manage their water resources. And I would say, as my colleague did, that we have to view water security in a comprehensive way because communities are using water for diverse reasons, whether it's domestically or for their livelihoods or for agriculture. So even though the sector or different actors might have their own a piece in the puzzle, we have to recognize the bigger picture as well.
Excellent, thank you. Maybe to Elad, and then I'll go to Luba and Marin. Elad first, thank you.
Yeah, so for me, to summarize, as a technology provider, I can say that technology can be a powerful tool for accelerating development, but its success depends heavily on collaboration and cooperation, and how well this technology is integrated into the social and also economical fabric of the local community. I think that these 2 points are essential for the success of any project.
Thank you so much. Luba?
Yeah, just to continue with what Elad said, I think we collectively have to start thinking long term. And in marginalized remote areas, digging boreholes might be a short-term solution, but ultimately, with population growth, surface water is the answer. And to access surface water, there should be a massive public or private or a combination of both investments and cooperation among multiple parties. It's not just engineering solution. There should be municipality, there should be utility. Someone has to understand how to do maintenance, how to understand how to deal with the public perception that the water is a public good and should be free, what the pricing should be. All of that requires years and years in preparation. And unless we start thinking upfront, we can rely on boreholes till the water ends, and water table drops, or there is a climate change shock or something like that. So for me, that's the big solution for me working in remote areas in East Africa, that let's start thinking long term, specifically for water solutions. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Marion?
Thanks. I think for me, one thing we shouldn't underestimate the importance of is a good grievance mechanism. So especially in places where we're operating fragile areas, having your grievance mechanism really integrated with the local structures, having local capable members in your team, so that then issues that are raised by the community around water and around other issues get to you as fast as possible. You don't want to be the last one to know that, you know, the community is having issues with water management, and you get to know about it when things are boiling. So I think a comprehensive grievance mechanism is key.
Excellent, thank you. So Batanai, Sarah, Elad, Luba, and Maren, thank you so much for taking time today to share your ideas with us. Thanks on behalf of this session to everyone who's taken time to join us. And as Elad said, you know, technology can be incredibly powerful as a tool. So thank you to the AV team. We managed to get everyone connected. We could hear them. They didn't get disconnected. We were unable to mute them. That's an absolute miracle. Thank you so much.